There is a prison most people live in their entire lives. No walls, no guards, no locks. Just the constant, exhausting management of other people's opinions. Words left unsaid. Boundaries never set. Paths never taken. Because someone whose approval you needed had already decided they were wrong for you. This is not weakness. It is the oldest human fear. If they dislike you, you are not safe. Carl Jung spent his life studying this fear. Where it comes from, what it costs, and what becomes available when you finally move through it. Today we go into that. Stay until the end, because being disliked by certain people is not a failure. It is a sign. 1. Why the need for approval is not a weakness. It is a wound. Before we can talk about the power to be disliked, we have to be honest about why being disliked feels so dangerous. Because for most people, even people who consider themselves confident, even people who have achieved significant things in the world, the experience of being genuinely disliked produces something that feels disproportionate to its apparent cause. A comment from someone whose opinion shouldn't matter, and it stays with you for days. A group that excludes you, and the sting of it is sharper than the situation warrants. A relationship that ends in disapproval, and the need to understand, to explain, to somehow resolve the other person's negative feeling about you becomes almost compulsive. This is not weakness. It is wiring. Jung traced it to the earliest layer of the psyche, the layer formed before language, before conscious memory, before the child had any capacity to evaluate the opinions being directed at them. In those earliest years, approval was not a preference. It was survival. The infant who failed to secure the approval of the caregiver, who was met with rejection, withdrawal, disapproval at the level of basic need, was genuinely in danger. The nervous system encoded this with brutal efficiency. Disapproval equals danger. Rejection equals threat. Being disliked equals something that must be immediately corrected. This encoding does not disappear when you grow up. It goes underground. And it operates, from below, invisibly, with the full force of a survival mechanism, every time someone expresses disapproval of who you are or what you have done. The reaction you feel is not irrational. It is the 3-year-old nervous system responding to a 35-year-old situation with a 35-year-old level of threat. Understanding this does not eliminate the reaction, but it changes your relationship to it. Because the moment you understand that the fear of disapproval is a wound rather than a truth, you can begin, for the first time, to question the story it tells you. 2. The persona and the price it extracts. Jung called it the persona, the mask constructed in response to the social environment, built across childhood and adolescence and early adulthood, from the answers to a single relentless question. What do I need to be in order to be accepted here? The persona is not deception exactly. It contains real parts of you. But it is always a selection. The parts that were rewarded, the parts that were safe, the parts that the environment approved of. And what the persona selects in, it selects out. The anger that made people uncomfortable, selected out. The ambition that seemed threatening, selected out. The sensitivity that was mocked, selected out. The opinion that contradicted the group, selected out. The desire that didn't fit the role, selected out. All of it, carefully, consistently, often unconsciously, edited away. In the short term, this works. The persona secures approval, maintains belonging, reduces the threat of exclusion. But Jung observed the long-term cost with clinical precision. The person who lives primarily through the persona does not experience the approval they receive as nourishing. Because the approval is not directed at them, it is directed at the performance. The compliment lands on the mask, not on the face beneath it. The belonging is contingent on the continued performance. not on the actual person performing it. And somewhere beneath the successful management of impressions, often unacknowledged, sometimes not even consciously felt, is the knowledge. If they knew the real one, the unedited, unmanaged, fully expressed version, would the approval survive? The person who has never tested this question, who has maintained the persona so consistently that the real self has rarely or never been fully expressed, lives with a specific, low-grade terror. That the answer is no. 3. What dislike is actually telling you? Here is the reframe that changes everything. Most people experience being disliked as information about their value. They dislike me, therefore something is wrong with me. Jung's framework suggests an entirely different reading. Being disliked is almost never information about your value. It is almost always information about the fit between who you actually are and what the person disliking you needs you to be. Consider what actually produces dislike. When you say something honest that contradicts what the group has decided is true, the people invested in that belief will dislike you. Not because you are wrong, because you are threatening something they need to maintain. When you set a boundary where none previously existed, the people who benefited from its absence will dislike you. Not because the boundary is unjust, because it costs them something. When you change direction, leave the expected path, refuse the expected role, become something other than what was anticipated, the people who were comfortable with the previous version will dislike you. Not because the new direction is wrong, because your change disturbs something in them. When you become more fully yourself, more honest, more direct, more present, more genuinely expressed, the people who were relating to the performance will dislike what they encounter instead. Not because the real you is worse, because it is different from what they signed up for. In every one of these cases, the dislike is a signal, but it is not the signal most people interpret it as. It is not, "You have done something wrong." It is, "You have done something real." And the people whose approval depended on you not doing that real thing have revealed, in their dislike, exactly what their approval was always contingent on: the performance, not the person. 4. The shadow of the approval seeker. Jung's concept of the shadow, the parts of the self suppressed and denied, has a specific relationship with the need for approval. Because the chronic approval seeker does not only suppress their behaviors and opinions, they suppress entire dimensions of their personality. The assertiveness that might provoke conflict, shadow. The ambition that might invite envy, shadow. The anger that might cause discomfort, shadow. The sexuality that might be judged, shadow. The difference, the ways in which you are genuinely, fundamentally unlike the group, suppressed so consistently and so thoroughly that you sometimes forget they were ever there. But the shadow does not disappear, it accumulates, and it finds expression, often in ways that directly undermine the approval that was being sought. The passive aggression that leaks out around the edges of the performed agreeableness. The sudden explosion of anger that has been building silently beneath years of compliance. The resentment that fills the relationships that were supposed to be sustained by accommodation. The exhaustion, chronic, sourceless, resistant to rest, of a person who has been performing rather than being for too long. Jung observed something else about the shadow of the approval seeker. It gets projected. The qualities suppressed because they were disapproved of. They don't just disappear inward, they appear outward, in the people the approval seeker most strongly judges. The person who suppressed their anger judges others for expressing it. The person who suppressed their ambition judges others for pursuing it. The person who suppressed their difference judges others for being different. The projection is not conscious. It is automatic, and it keeps the approval seeker trapped in a specific hell, surrounded by the very qualities they most need to reclaim. unable to recognize them because the recognition would require acknowledging that they exist within themselves. The first step toward the power to be disliked is always the same. Begin to reclaim the shadow. Begin to acknowledge, with honesty rather than judgment, the parts of yourself you have suppressed in the service of approval. Because you cannot be genuinely yourself until you know what genuinely yourself contains. 5. The difference between not caring and being free. This distinction is critical, because the path to the power to be disliked is not the path of not caring. The person who genuinely doesn't care what anyone thinks is not free, they are defended. There is a difference, felt, internal, fundamental, between the person who has numbed themselves to the experience of disapproval and the person who has done the genuine psychological work of becoming secure enough that disapproval no longer controls their behavior. The defended person, the one who performs indifference, is still organized around the question of what others think. They are simply answering it with aggression rather than accommodation. The opposite of people-pleasing is not contempt for people. It is genuine freedom from the need to use other people's reactions as the primary measure of your own worth. Jung called this individuation, the development of a psychological center that exists independently of external validation. Not because external feedback is irrelevant. Genuine feedback from people who know you and care about your development is valuable. But because your sense of who you are, your fundamental sense of worth, direction, and identity does not live in other people's reactions to you. It lives in something more internal, more stable, more genuinely yours. The values you have examined and chosen, rather than inherited and performed. The self-knowledge that comes from honest interior encounter, rather than external definition. The relationship with your own depths, your shadow, your genuine desire, your real values, that tells you who you are, regardless of whether anyone else agrees. This is the foundation from which the power to be disliked becomes possible. Not through coldness, not through the performance of invulnerability, through the genuine development of an interior life substantial enough that approval, while sometimes pleasant, is no longer necessary. 6. What becomes possible when you stop needing to be liked? Jung described what he observed in patients who had done this work. And what he described is not what most people expect. They did not become isolated. They did not become arrogant. They did not stop caring about other people. They became, paradoxically, more genuinely connected. Because connection that does not require performance is possible in a way that connection requiring it never is. The person who has stopped needing your approval can be genuinely present with you. They are not monitoring how they are being received, not editing in real time, not managing the impression. They are simply there, with you, as what they actually are. And this genuine presence, rare in a world of performed selves, is experienced by the people around them as something extraordinary, as safety, as depth, as the specific relief of being with someone who is not performing. Which means, and this is the paradox at the heart of the whole thing, the person who has genuinely stopped needing approval often receives more genuine connection than the person who has spent their entire life pursuing it. Not the approval of everyone, not the shallow, contingent validation of the persona, but the deep, real, sustaining connection of people who are relating to the actual person rather than the performance. This is what Jung meant when he said that the most important journey is the journey inward. Not because the outer world doesn't matter, because the quality of the outer world, the quality of your relationships, your work, your presence in any room you enter, is entirely determined by the quality of your relationship with your own interior. The person who knows themselves, who has integrated their shadow, who has developed a genuine center that does not require external validation, brings something into every interaction that the approval-seeking person structurally cannot. The full, undivided, unperformed weight of their actual presence. And presence, genuine, complete, unmanaged presence, is the most powerful thing one human being can offer another. 7. The 7 practices of becoming free. Not techniques for performing confidence, the actual architecture of developing genuine freedom from the need for approval. Practice 1. Identify whose disapproval you fear most. Not in the abstract. Specifically, the person whose negative opinion would destabilize you most completely. Then ask, honestly, with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, what does their approval mean to me? What does my need for it reveal about what I believe about myself? Practice 2. Say the thing you have been editing. Not aggressively, not as an experiment in provocation. The genuine opinion, the honest observation, the real response that you have been softening, qualifying, swallowing, in a situation where saying it serves something true. Notice what happens. In the other person. In you. The catastrophe you have been preventing through self-censorship is almost always smaller than the self you have been sacrificing to prevent it. Practice 3. Set the boundary you have been avoiding. The one that has been needed for months or years. The one you haven't set because of what the other person might feel. Set it. Cleanly. Without apology. Without over-explanation. And let whatever they feel about it be what they feel. Their reaction to your boundary is information about them. Your willingness to maintain it despite their reaction is the practice. Practice 4. Do something that will genuinely not be universally approved of. Not for shock value, for genuine self-expression, the creative direction that makes certain people uncomfortable, the professional choice that confuses people who had a different plan for you, the personal decision that doesn't match what the group would choose. Execute it without announcement, without seeking validation, without monitoring the response. Practice 5. Sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood. When someone has the wrong idea about you, and the urge to correct it is immediate and strong, practice waiting. Not forever, but long enough to distinguish between the situations where clarification genuinely matters and the situations where the urge to clarify is purely about your own discomfort with being seen incorrectly. The ability to exist in a space where someone misunderstands you, without immediately rushing to correct the misunderstanding, is one of the clearest signs of genuine internal security. Practice 6. Audit your relationships for conditionality. Which of your relationships require a performance to maintain? Where must you be smaller, quieter, less honest, less fully yourself, in order to be accepted? These relationships are not necessarily bad, but they are worth seeing clearly, because a life built primarily on conditional relationships is a life spent primarily in performance, and a life spent primarily in performance is not a life fully lived. Practice 7. Return to the question Jung never stopped asking. Who would you be if no one was watching? Not as a fantasy, as a genuine investigation. In the privacy of your own interior, with no audience, no performance, no management of impression, what do you actually think? Actually want? Actually believe? The distance between that person and the one you present to the world is the distance you have yet to travel. Begin traveling it. 8. The final truth. Jung wrote something that has stayed with me since the first time I encountered it. He wrote that the most dangerous thing in the world is the unlived life. Not the life of failure, not the life of mistake or loss, or genuine tragedy. The unlived life, the life spent in such careful management of other people's opinions, that the actual life, the one that was possible, the one that was yours, never quite happened. The person who never said the true thing, who never set the genuine boundary, who never took the direction that called to them, because someone whose approval they needed had a different idea, who performed, for decades, a version of themselves that was acceptable to the audience, and arrived at the end having never fully inhabited the original. This is what Jung considered the genuine tragedy of human existence. Not the dramatic failures, the quiet ones, the daily, accumulated, entirely invisible tragedy of the self that was never fully expressed. The power to be disliked is not the power to be difficult. It is not the power to be cold, or contemptuous, or indifferent to the experience of others. It is the power to be real, to bring the actual, unedited, fully expressed version of yourself into your life, into your relationships, your work, your decisions, your daily presence in the world, and to let that be enough. Even when it isn't enough for some people. Even when it costs you the approval of people whose approval you have been carefully maintaining. Even when it means being genuinely, publicly, uncomfortably disliked by people who preferred the performance. Because the alternative, the life of permanent, invisible, self-imposed accommodation, costs something those people never see. It costs you. The you that was possible. The life that was available. The relationships that could have been real instead of managed. The work that could have been genuine instead of acceptable. The presence that could have been full instead of filtered. The power to be disliked is not a social